an organization that has successfully disrupted a sector through technology, then commercializing the platform and helping other companies to modernize as well. So when a chief executive of a bank sees what it looks like to run a whole bank on a single cloud-native system, where you've got a single view of everything, you've got beautiful employee journeys that help employees and guide them through a set of decisions in a very intuitive way. When the chief executive sees that, the penny drops. They launched in April last year with a very full-service digital bank, transaction accounts, savings accounts, 16 currencies, international payments, Google Pay, Apple Pay. There was nothing M about their MVP. Week one, they were onboarding 15,000 customers a day. They'd done a fantastic job on the marketing.
But I think the AI moment is sort of that once-in-a-lifetime moment for a lot of these banks. They're realizing that their legacy infrastructure can just not take that foundational layer of AI and do anything with it. They cannot continue to tinker around with AI as a feature because that's just not going to give them the opportunity. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's episode of Couchonomics with Arjun. Joining me all the way from the UK is Nick Drewett. Nick is the Chief Commercial Officer of Arjun. We'll get into where Arjun comes from and what Arjun is all about. But before that, let me welcome Nick to the couch.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Dubai. I'm assuming this is definitely not your first trip.
Definitely not my first trip.
Right. And we met yesterday at the Dubai FinTech Summit. So I guess people know that this is being shot around the Dubai FinTech Summit, although the episode will come out a few weeks after the event. So Nick, I guess we get straight into it. Can you start with sort of telling us a little bit about what Arjun is all about?
Sure. So Arjun is the technology platform that runs Starling Bank and now two other banks around the world. And the story is, I guess there's two parts of the story of Starling Bank and the story of Arjun. And both are very relevant.
Let's start with Starling then, because
Sure.
I think it would be good for the audience to know Starling, because I think Starling, although is very well known among, I guess, most of us financial services people, but I think, we get a wider audience sometimes.
Yes. Well, Starling is a very successful UK digital bank, a neobank. One of the first digital banks to be profitable in the world. Very successful, has grown to 4.5 million customers since launch in 2017. That's a combination of both retail customers and small business customers. So we've now got nearly 10% of the UK market for small businesses. So we're, I think, number 5 in the UK in the UK market, and growing rapidly. So and generating a lot of profit. Also, the growth to 4.5 million has been achieved without ever offering market-leading interest rates or financial incentives to switch, or indeed without really big spending on marketing. It's mostly been through word of mouth and organic growth and it's very popular, which I think is testament to what Anne Bowden set out to do in the first place. She was the COO of AIB in Dublin and had a long career at senior positions in banks. And she saw that there was an opportunity to use modern technology to make banking better for people. And so that was the original idea behind Starling Bank. And I remember meeting her in those days, and she told me that they were going to build their own core banking platform. And I thought she was nuts, because who does that? Certainly in those days. But she was absolutely right. If she'd bought something that was commercially available, she arguably may not have created a genuine digital bank, but a branchless bank that doesn't make banking better for people. Mm-hmm. So that's the story of Starling Bank. I think the growth to 4.5 million without big marketing spend, one of the key drivers of that is customer service. It's so Starling is now the number 2 brand in the UK for customer service, just below Timpson's, the shoe repair company. And one of the reasons for that is because 98% of whatever customers do is done through a very, very functionally rich app. But when they do call us, it's usually because they've got a problem and they need help. So we operate a 24/7 human-centric call center with no IVR, no annoying recorded messages. We view it as an opportunity to speak to our customers and help them in moments of stress. And that's proved to be a real differentiator in the UK market.
Fair enough. And I think for people who don't know, should know that I think there's about 450, 500 digital neobanks. Less than 5% of them are actually profitable. And the ones who are profitable, a significant percentage of them actually come out of existing ecosystems. So they have that leverage in terms of cheaper access to customers, possibly the ability to embed finance. So I think it's that much more, if I may say, a tick in the box to the vision Anne had, which is that you've been able to turn around a profit without having any of those, if I may use the word, advantages. So it's great. So switch to Engine then. So what's the story on Engine then?
Well, the story on
the
Engine,
genesis story, if I may ask.
Yeah, it's interesting because Anne never had a vision or a strategy to establish a software business. So along the way, and when Starling launched, we used third-party software in the mix. But along the way, it's all been replaced and the functionality has been brought onto the platform. So we found ourselves having built a complete banking platform. So the whole of Starling Bank runs on a single cloud-native system. And we were increasingly getting visits, sort of study tours from banks around the world, wanting to learn about digital transformation and digital banking. And they'd meet with Starling Bank in London, and they'd find out about the technology that ran it and would start saying, well, this is great. Could we use that? I think that helped with the idea of launching Engine. I think the other thing that happened was Starling was going for a EU banking license through Dublin with a view to expanding internationally, but concluded that the software business was a much better route to international growth for the Starling Group.
Interesting.
So Engine was set up so that we could genuinely partner with banks around the world where we provide that technology platform and as part of a sort of broader collaboration to help them with their digital propositions.
So let's look at this, right? In the sense, the question here is very simple. Why do you think the time is right for you guys to take, if I may use the word, Engine global, right? The term global, right? Because it's one thing to sort of say that, we could passport our infrastructure into markets which look very similar to ours. I'll use the word parts of Europe, right? But then, your intention in the conversation we had yesterday, both with you and with Raman, was you're actually looking at this globally. Yes. Why do you think the time is right now?
I think because, so a number of reasons. So you touched on the localization. I'll come back to that. But I think taking a step back, the evolution of banking technology. So until Engine, which I would argue is the world's most mature cloud-native banking platform, because it's been forged in the flames of building a real and successful digital bank. So before us, the alternative approach to building a digital bank was either use, if you're an existing bank, you use your existing core banking system and build a new mobile channel on that. Or you go down the route of, if you want a next-gen core, you have to buy a lot of other products and offerings and integrate them to create a modern banking platform. So both are kind of suboptimal. And they result in, I think, the better of the two is the composable route. You're using modern technology. You can make banking better for people and not just create a branchless bank. But it's difficult and it's expensive, and potentially that's why many digital banks aren't profitable yet. It's also inelegant. It's you're buying expensive licenses and then only using a portion of the functionality. So what we have is the next step from that. So it's modern technology. It's all cloud native and real time, with a modern data architecture that allows flexibility. You can extend it and create your own bespoke propositions and journeys on top of it. So it's composable, but it's also coherent and complete, so more useful. So I think that dramatically lowers the technology risk and cost of building your digital bank, and helps create a more modern and agile business going forward.
Get it. I will come back to the competitive landscape in a bit, right? I want to go a bit deeper into what Engine is, and then I'll come back in terms of the choices that they have. So you have I guess, a big market out there in terms of there's a lot of incumbent banks, right? Might call them traditional, whatever the word is, who are having to digitally transform themselves, whether it's branchless or complete, create digital attackers or even get themselves to the 21st century, right? You have, as you said, a number of digital banks which are incubating themselves in different parts of the world, and we'll come and talk about one which you have powered in Eastern Europe, right? You have a number of, if I may call, wallets, which are sort of hitting that very interesting juncture in their evolution, where the question of whether or not they should become banks themselves or not, and possibly, there's a different cohort of players too. Who are you? So two parts to this question: who are you getting maximum traction from in terms of conversations? And is there a particular segment that you have consciously said we will double down on? Because there's only so much what one can do, right? So what's Engine's view on these two questions?
So where we've got most traction is anyone that's run a bank before, basically, and knows how hard it is dealing with legacy systems or managing an IT function that's managing all those legacy systems. So when a chief executive of a bank sees what it looks like to run a whole bank on a single cloud-native system, where you've got a single view of everything, you've got beautiful employee journeys that help employees and guide them through a set of decisions in a very intuitive way. When the chief executive sees that, the penny drops how much, what it means to modernize their bank. It's not just about the technology, it's about the people. So that's where we've got the most traction. Have we doubled down on it? No. I think we're at the stage where we're not chasing revenue, we're chasing case studies. Interesting and noteworthy case studies. And we've been very fortunate so far that the clients that we've managed to take on and work with, and the first two have gone live, and we're working with some others as well. They're all going to be fantastic case studies. So Salt Bank's a wonderful story, and AMP Bank as well. Okay,
so let's talk a little bit about Salt Bank.
Yes.
How did it come around? And it's in Romania, from what
it is. Yeah. So Salt Bank came about because the largest bank in the region, in Southeast Europe, very, very successful bank, the Bank of Transylvania. They saw the threat of Revolut in Romania, where to revolute has become a verb. There are two countries in Europe where to revolute has become a verb, Romania and Ireland. So they wanted to launch a standalone digital bank that gave people a good alternative to Revolut. So, and they wanted to launch it fast. So they had acquired a defunct bank for its license, and they wanted to repurpose that into a digital proposition. They had been exploring a composable route, but then they came across us and decided quite quickly that they would be our first client. So then the implementation took 12 months. They launched in April last year with a very full service digital bank, transaction accounts, savings accounts, 16 currencies, international payments, Google Pay, Apple Pay. There was nothing M about their MVP. Week one, they were onboarding 15,000 customers a day, which is remarkable. They'd done a fantastic job on the marketing. I would argue one of the things that helped that was because the technology implementation was relatively straightforward. It wasn't a high-stress program. It allowed management to spend a lot of time thinking about the marketing and the launch. So that was 12 months ago. They are now one of the top 10 banks in Romania with more than 500,000 customers.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. More than 500,000 in whatever period of time they've been operational.
Yes. There was a very pleasing, in December, an influencer in Romania did an episode, and he cut up his Revolut card and said Salt Bank's the way forward. And that week they onboarded 40,000 customers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But even more pleasingly, they're now doing innovative things on their own. So they can still take advantage of new features that Starling launches. So Starling 6 months ago did the call status indicator to help customers spot when they're being when someone's trying to dupe them into transferring money elsewhere by purporting to be their bank. You can check on your app whether it's your bank calling you, whether your bank has ever called you. When you're about to make a payment, it says if someone's telling you to transfer this money on behalf of the bank, be aware we have never called you. So that's been very, very successful for Starling Bank to reduce fraud in the UK. They're rolling that out they have rolled it out in Romania, but they're also doing their own innovation. They're doing things in the Romanian market that we're looking at and going, oh, that's really cool.
So explain this to me, right? And this is where I'll show my lack of knowledge here, but let me ask the dumb straight question here, right? So Engine powers Starling, right, which has its own roadmap, obviously akin to the clients it's targeting and the customers it has and the services and the products it wants to offer. You then have Salt, which is going down its own line of business, and Starling is very, very strong in the SME segment, growing in the retail, but not as big. Salt, I do not know if it sounds more of a retail bank versus an SME. I'm sure they're doing SMEs, but with retail. And then you are also, customizing and evolving the platform to other markets, so other regulations, localization. I'll get to some more complexities as you start dabbling in the Middle East, where most banks are not cloud native. Data residency is a big issue. How are you managing these multiple, if I may say, development roadmaps? Isn't this going to become extremely complex?
It's a single code base. So, but there's an incredible amount of innovation and customization you can do through configuring and orchestrating the APIs.
Okay.
So that's essentially it. So Salt Bank's onboarding journey is very, very different to Starling's onboarding journey. So they're using Onfido, highly automated approach to onboarding. Whereas Starling is very manual. In terms of the reviewing the customer selfie videos. So that works for Starling. They wanted something very different. That was all handled through the orchestration layer. No changes to the code base, the underlying code base. So there's an immense amount of flexibility inherent in the platform. People often wonder and worry, rightly, well, if we're taking Engine, do we have to adopt Starling's way of doing everything and adopt your process? Well, no, is the short answer. They're pretty good. And so, we would say it gives you an outstanding starting point. But to the extent that you need local differences or nuances or a completely different business approach, that's possible through orchestration and configuration of the APIs. Then, in terms of evolving the platform itself, so Starling is, they have 350 engineers and a roadmap of their own. We have our own engineers. By the end of this year, we'll have 200 in the UK, evolving the platform for the needs of Engine clients. And the two needs are kept in close lockstep. So we can take advantage of innovations that Starling does and vice versa. But we have our own roadmap based on the needs of our clients and of Engine.
Okay. So we talked about Salt. You mentioned there's another client that you have.
Yes. So AMP Bank in Australia.
Yep.
So not Europe. And so that was an existing bank that wanted to launch a new digital SME bank.
Okay.
So a sidecar approach to modernization.
Mm-hmm.
So they've launched a nice digital business bank in Australia. They recently launched a new feature with a Qantas integration. So they're now giving Qantas points, which are very popular in Australia,
Yeah.
based on the balances on your accounts, and so that's proving very popular. So they're growing rapidly now as well.
And so that is, and in that case, again, it's a quasi greenfield implementation, I'm assuming.
Quasi greenfield,
Right,
yes.
because you do integrate back into the core bank in some way or the other.
Yes,
Right.
and clearly they now have the option to modernize the whole bank, having established a cloud-native stack alongside.
So I was going to ask a question, but I think it's less relevant in the sense that if you're really not selling in the market where Starling exists itself as a bank, then I guess that question of why would you want a potential competitor's platform really doesn't arise. So I'm assuming UK is not a market that you're going to particularly look to target.
Actually, we are.
Okay.
And we are.
How does that play out then?
Well, it's interesting. When I joined Engine, I think that was my primary concern. Would banks be worried that they'd be treated as second-class citizens, that Starling would somehow get priority, or is Starling one of many clients of Engine? And I think over time that we will evolve that way. But actually, what they found is the value that they get from having a relationship with an organisation that gets banking is worth so much. The relationship that we have isn't just about the technology. It's about the way we run the bank and sharing ideas. And we don't have the right answers for everything, but it's a much more value-adding dialogue. The engineers don't just explain the features of the platform. They can talk to the client about why they built it that way and how it's evolved over the years and what we've learned. So that sense of working with an organisation that is both an engineering company and gets banking is very, very valuable. And in terms of the competition in the UK, I think the other perspective is, why would Starling offer something that arguably can give banks competitive advantage?
Exactly.
In the UK. But we formed the view that that's okay. The mobile app is where we have a very, very good and very functionally rich mobile app in the UK, and it's very popular. And we've chunked it up. We've created SDKs that kind of doesn't do justice to what they are. They're sort of modules of a mobile banking app that can be used to help accelerate a client's own mobile app build. And I think in the UK, though, other banks won't want a knockoff Starling app. They'll want their own to a greater degree, whereas a bank in Australia is quite happy to have something that leverages the Starling experience.
No, I totally get that. In the sense, I think the question I always wonder, and obviously, which is, you've answered the question in terms of why would Starling want to offer, because if you're a digital bank, your platform is part of that differentiator, right? You cannot walk away from it. But yes, if you deconstruct it, and please correct me if I've got it wrong, you've got the engagement layer, you've got the orchestration layer, and then I guess you've got the core product layer at the bottom, right? My question then here is, as it gets deeper into the platform, right, where products need to be built differently because regulations only allow you to do certain things. In certain parts of the world, you have banking which is delivered in a very different manner, right? Yesterday, again, I bring up the conversation with Raman and I had, where in a number of markets, specifically in Asia Pac, which you're entering, phygital is actually quite a concept that is capturing traction. And as a matter of fact, some of the most successful ones have a phygital business model. Others who are a part of a wider ecosystem, right, where they have built beyond banking capabilities. How complex does it get? And is the answer going to be that you're going to move and localize your engineering into these various markets to get a better understanding of how banking operates in this market, or will it all continue to be managed out of the UK and you'll have some sort of a decentralized front-end business?
Yeah, we'll still operate a single code base.
That goes without saying, yeah.
And the fact that these are real-time cloud-native services that all speak to each other through APIs enables the integration and different business models. So you raise phygital. Similarly in the US, there's still the branch model is still prevalent. And in the UK, people want to know, well, how we deal with branches. And I think just take branches. you can, we can create a branch module that sits on top, that is part of the what we call the management portal that the bank employees use to do their work. There are different models for addressing branches, and you can, if a bank wants to move to a sort of more of an Apple store-like experience with a cash recycling machine in the corner, that's possible. Or you could create a modern version of an existing branch with essentially all of the functionality that you need for a teller integrated with a cash recycling machine. So there are different models. I think the point is, on our side, the problem of integration is much less.
Okay. So let me flip the question. What are the challenges in your business then?
The challenges in our business. I think one of the significant ones is we're offering this as a managed service, and it's a material outsource for any organization. So there's a high degree of trust required. It's not buying a new solution in a composable architecture. It's a very significant relationship. So I think these have long sales cycles. It takes time to build trust and momentum. I think we're seeing that. We've been very fortunate with the first clients that we've secured. They've been very supportive, very like-minded, and we've the projects have delivered on time, so they're wonderful success stories now.
So, and again, are you to kind of develop that trust? Are you sort of going in with a more of a modular approach where you're saying, okay, you don't have to have the entirety of the engine. We can help you on this part. Use this aspect of the engine first. Get yourself more comfortable with us, and then we expand. What does the engagement look like in terms of?
So up to a point. I mean, I think primarily it's through relationships and people. I mean, in the same way that Starling Bank has shown that it kind of takes a digital bank to be human. One of the big things about Starling is the way we manage people and the human-centric approach to building the digital bank. In the same way, Engine, it's about the people and about trust, the quality of our engineers, the quality of the people that are working with the bank, the way we engage with them. We genuinely want these to be long-term, trusted relationships. So I think that's first and foremost what it's about. It goes back as well to the quality of the dialogue. We've cracked the technology problem so that banks can focus on the important things like managing people and marketing and innovation, and that's where the dialogue with Starling really helps and adds value. So I think that's the primary way. But certainly there's the possibility of gradually adopting the platform rather than doing a big bang from A to B, particularly if you're an existing bank and you're not launching a digital sidecar strategy, but you're using this to modernize your existing bank. You're going to absolutely adopt that approach. You're going to establish a coexistence capability, have engines sitting alongside your very complex and problematic estate, and then gradually move customers and products across and managing the operational transformation alongside. So yes.
Okay, so let me play it. I'll try and put myself in the shoes of a bank. I do advise a number of them, so I've got some feel for them. I'll talk a bit about business models before we get into competition. Right? You have this trend which is sort of, I personally think, capturing the imagination and potentially has the ability to redefine banking the way it actually works, which is everything to do with embedded finance, and the flip side of the coin, which is banking as a service, right? At least what I'm seeing over the last few years is there seems to be a convergence going on between banking as a service providers and, if I may call them, core banking providers, right? Because I think you realize that you cannot be playing one or the other game, right? Because banking as a service then is a very, very thin line, and you could be easily, if I may say, pushed aside by people who can offer the whole banking sector. The other thing is that we've obviously seen, unbundling, bundling, rebundling, unbundling, and you do have modular players, right? So, for example, if you're looking at just payments, you can go to a player which is, a managed services provider in payments. Increasingly, similar things are happening on wealth management, wealth tech, right? How do you see, and this is purely not an engine answer, it's more of a Nick answer I'm expecting. How do you see all of this play out in terms of the technology behavior, technology buying behavior among banks, right? Because you've got a number of divergent requirements, right? How do you see this play out, and what is how's engine seeing at it? So it's just two parts to the question.
I think my perspective is probably coloured by the kinds of banks we deal with,
and that's great.
And they tend to be medium-sized or larger banks that have got all of the problems of a legacy estate and all of the associated vendor problems, and they're feeling the competition from digital challenges in their market and need to respond. So I think if you're in that position, the managed service approach makes a lot of sense, because you're consciously treating it as an outsource. You're passing the problem of complexity to a third-party organization and let them worry about it, and you're piggybacking on the fact that it's been proven at scale and robust by an organization that's running a tier 2 UK bank. So that takes a lot of worry away, and the problem of modernizing takes a lot of technical risk out of the problem of modernizing. So I think that model will become more prevalent.
So will you work with others? Will you work with a specialized payments platform?
Yes.
And you would say, okay, we won't use Engine's payment capabilities, but
if a client wants us to, yes. I mean, we have our own cloud-native card processor as part of the platform. So we're that will evolve and have its own roadmap as well. But yes, we're very open-minded. I think it goes back to the point I mentioned earlier, that at the moment we're chasing interesting case studies, not revenue. So at the moment, that's our focus, sort of 100%. Maybe in a few years' time, we'll start exploring unbundling the platform and driving them for growth once we've established that.
And there's enough market to go after, specifically if you look globally. So let's not take the discussion. The competition question is so let's assume you are targeting that sort of medium to medium large bank, right? They're traditional. They are actually the ones who are feeling most of the pain with these new digital banks coming, because they're the ones who are actually losing out on their customers. I would arguably, I think the big banks are still sort of playing the trust game, and they're bothered definitely about the digital banks, but arguably a little less bothered because they're still holding on to the large deposits and the big relationships, right? Now, as a bank, I look out and I say, right, my current infrastructure isn't up to the mark for whatever reason it is. Here's what I need to look globally, right? So here's the choices I have. I have, I can obviously go back to the, if I may call, the incumbent legacy infrastructure providers who've also kind of, they've also upskilled their game. They've kind of come around, and they have propositions now which are a lot more, if I may call, lighter in terms of the infrastructure, cloud native, et cetera, et cetera. You then have the next gen platforms, and we were speaking about a few of them before we actually started speaking, and quite a lot of them are now in the market. There's the likes of Engine, which have come out of existing banks where you said they're battle hardened. They understand how a bank actually runs, so it's within the DNA, which the first two might not, right, necessarily. And then there's always the option to do what Starling did, which is, why don't we build our own, right? So I know this is a question that I've asked in a different way, is how are you sort of, so I get the battle hardened bit. That aside, what else is the compelling proposition, right, for me as a mid to medium large business to say, let me go with Engine, let me not look at any of those three options? Because the first two options arguably are a little bit easier to make a decision on, right? Because They've got a track record of doing that. You're obviously not that mature in the market, right? So how are you convincing these guys on that risk? Are you using very attractive commercial terms? Are you...
Yeah, there are a variety of ways. If you're the real value from the platform comes from, I think, one of two things. One, growth. The difference between a modern platform and solution in terms of the flexibility and the things you can do for customers. So seeing Salt Bank now innovating under their own steam, beating competition in the marketplace. Now that's a new digital proposition that has not fallen flat in the market. It's really taken hold. That's enabled by a modern solution like Engine. Similarly, cost to serve is very low compared to you've got depending on the scope of what a bank wants to do and move, but you've got an endpoint which is sort of Starling like cost performance. Our cost to serve is a fraction of any other tier 2 UK bank, partly because we don't have all of the technology complexity, but also and partly clearly customers have signed up for a digital self-service experience. That helps. But the fact that all the processes are straight through, we've focused on the employee experience, you've got a single view of everything. There are many ways in which the cost base of Starling and customers running Engine can be much lower. Or you can adopt a sort of, it comes with an implicit operating model, and you can make strategic choices. Starling, for example, runs a 24/7 call center, so a large body of the Starling 4,000 people workforce is focused on customer service. You could equally run a chatbot, and you could work that lever much harder on costs if you wanted to. So, but fundamentally, the cost base of any bank running on Engine is going to be way lower in terms of cost to serve. And then you've got I think the third dimension is implementation, cost, and speed. When you're not building a composable solution and building all the workflows and doing all of the integration in order to get the benefits of a modern banking platform, that is a big selling point.
Fair enough. Let's look at your growth and expansion plan, right? So banking is everywhere, right? There are some massive markets like the United States, mm-hmm. right? Europe is also quite significant. Asia Pac is quite interesting, unique in a number of different ways. Then we're also obviously we're sitting here in the Middle East. Let's call it MENA or MIA, because Africa has actually quite a fast and rapidly growing banking scene. How do you go about picking which geographies you want to spend time and effort in? Because, it does take a significant amount of time and effort, and then obviously the localization, local regulation, so on and so forth. So is there a method behind the madness here?
Up to a point. I think because, I say up to a point, clearly there are some very attractive markets. The US is the obvious one. It's a very, very big market. A difficult one to crack because of the power of the incumbents like FIS and Jack Henry and Fiserv, and medium-sized banks that are running and regional banks that are running on those platforms. They're risk averse, quite rightly. They're cautious. So we need to prove ourselves in the US market in order to crack America. But that is our intention. I think around the world there are other. The Gulf is a fantastically positive and inspiring market. The conversations that we have here are genuinely energizing. People want to grow and invest and do things. So I think we're very confident that we'll get traction here. I think around the world, there's a lot going on in Southeast Asia, and we're having some really interesting conversations there. We've also got a client in Australia, and we're looking to. And we have a team in Sydney, so we will sell more in that area. I think the up to a point bit comes from the fact that people come to us quite a lot. People, the Starling story is very interesting. The Engine story is becoming equally interesting. So in the same way that before Engine was born, banks would come and visit us to learn about Engine, to learn about Starling. Now they're visiting us to learn about Engine and what they can do with it. So we're in a fortunate position. But we've touched on it. There's only so far we can go as charming Brits flying around the world. We will need to establish local offices with a local understanding, local customer service and local relationships with an understanding of the local nuances. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're setting up an office here in Dubai, similarly in the US, and we'll, over the years we'll have more.
Okay, so it's my final question. We're soon out of time. You're now in the region, if I may say so, and obviously you will discover this region and the nuances and the uniquenesses of this region itself. Dubai is a great place to sort of start the operations, but you will actually very quickly realize, and this is just my opinion, but please double check it, we are very different markets, right? For example, if you look at data domicility challenges, if you look at the fact that most of the banks actually in the kingdom are still on-prem, right? And they're not sort of cloud native the way you would sort of imagine some other parts of the world, is that you will find that these nuances are actually quite decisive in the way that they drive the decision making of the people, right? What really excited you about the MENA region? Because it isn't the biggest of the regions when you compare to Asia Pacific or the US. Was there some initial conversations that got you guys going here, or do you see this as a hub which is going to service a wider region?
Yes, you're right. I've visited many times the kingdom, to visit Qatar many times. The QIA is an investor in Starling Bank, so we have a good relationship there. Visited Bahrain. So we have we're not naive when it comes to some of the challenges, but I think that's a moment in time. Google has a capability in the kingdom. AWS has announced plans there. I think every country is looking at this and looking at how to modernize and be relevant. And I'm confident that the cloud infrastructure will be part of that. So yes, and I think there is. Within MENA, there are many countries where we can help banks now, and I think that will only increase. And yes, as you say, this is a hub this could be a hub for a broader region as well.
No, definitely. I think you've got massive markets to the east, if I may say. I'm not sure whether India is part of the game, but maybe it's not. Pakistan is actually quite a large market, and then if you get into North Africa, you've got a beast in Australia. You've got in sub-Saharan Africa, there's Nigeria, and a lot of people sort of use that. No, but Nick, welcome to I guess Dubai. Enjoy your few days here attending the conference. I think without doubt, I think for me, who's been in this sort of, I guess, sector for the last 14, 15 years, a little bit jaded now, if I may use that term, I think finally the big question mark has arrived for a number of these banks. And we're very lucky we didn't speak about it today, which is the AI question, right? I think banks, internet came, banks took about a decade getting their digital banking or their internet banking sorted. Mobile came, and till date, we have mobile apps in the region which are, nothing short of pathetic, right? But I think the AI moment is sort of that once in a lifetime moment for a lot of these banks, and they're realizing that their legacy infrastructure can just not take that foundational layer of AI and do anything with it. And they cannot continue to tinker around with AI as a feature because that's just not going to give them the opportunity. That creates the if I may say, the difference between the haves and the have-nots. And I think that's why I personally feel the time is right. So I think your timing is great. I think collect those case studies and then industrialize those case studies, right? And this is what I tell to a number of the next-gen infrastructure providers too. I said, this is the big moment. I do think in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be more changes in terms of infrastructure than we've had in the last maybe 25 to 30 years, because I think AI is completely at a different scale than mobile banking and stuff. But in any case, those Those are my words. Nobody really cares about what I have to say. But thank you for coming for the show, and I'm sure we will meet again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Nick Drewett, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Engine. As you heard from him, Engine is, I'll use the term, a spin-off business which is coming out of Starling. Starling itself is an excellent story for anyone looking to build a bank or learn from the case study. We wish Nick and the team the very best, and I think if they're going to be in the MENA region, I'm sure we're going to watch their growth over the years. So with that, I'll say goodbye and see you next week. Bye-bye.